Valia, perhaps we can slowly start. We're also
Okay.
recording this.
Okay.
And we will be admitting people as they come.
Okay, that's good. Shall I start introducing the webinar? Okay. So first of all, welcome everyone to the Transformative Change for Biodiversity seminar. It's the third seminar that we're organizing within our cluster of projects on transformative change. The ones that are mostly involved in these are CircHive, BioTrails, our project, TC4B, Planet4B, Selena, Mosaic, and BioNext. We are a series of European projects funded under the Transformative Change cluster call. And we organize a series of webinars which have been dedicated to conceptual foundations of transformative change, methodological approaches that our different projects follow around transformative change. And today it's the more practical, actual application of the work that we have been doing, because most of the projects are also now progressing and we have results. We have worked on the case studies. So today we will have four main presentations in which projects like BioTrails and BioNext will show results of their actual work that has been happening in different case studies. We will, what I forgot to say is that, of course, this is all happening with the support of the Ecosystem Services Partnership, which has a training force on task force, on training and education. And Luis Nostroza, to whom I will give the word in a few minutes, will tell us a few words about the ESP. We also have with us the first talk from Veronica Zacco from the European Research Council and its executive agency, and she will give us an overview of a report that they have compiled with an overview of all the work happening on transformative change from several European projects. Then Christy Walker from ETH will showcase the Greek case study that they have worked on the life cycle impact assessment. Mara De Pater from the BioNext project, she will give us their own perspective from their case study application. And then we will have Vasilia Pentsou from BioTrails again, who will show us the serious game application that they have developed. So without further delay, I will give the floor to Luis Nostroza from the Ecosystem Services Partnership to tell us a few words about the association that is supporting all of that.
Thank you very much, Valia, for the introduction and also for organizing this webinar that, as Valia is explaining, it takes place within the activities that the Ecosystem Services Partnership is regularly organizing. We have a task force on training and education that actually we are now in the process of upgrading to a working group. So we want to really now include activities that have been normally left out of our scope because of time and also because of capacity in the sense of people engaged, referring particularly to primary education and high school education. So invitation for everyone, of course, if you are interested into nature interactions, nature-human interactions in the sense of education, feel free to contact and join us. So if you can just move to probably to the next one, I'm going to just try to be very brief. So we are a network of more than 3,000 people, mostly academics, some practitioners. We are a really vibrant community. And basically, my main message here for you, if you are attending this transformative change, probably you are not aware that there is a conference at this time that we organize in Australia. And the invitation basically is to join our network. We started in 2008. We have been organizing conferences on a regular basis. And the next one is going to take place in May in Prague. So if you come, you can also join probably the beer excursion I'm going to be personally organizing. You can move to the next one, probably. So as I said, we have a structure that helps us to give space for people basically to develop your own interest. Our scope is really broad in the sense of nature-human interactions. We understand this as a co-production of the benefits we receive in the form of ecosystem services. And for that, we have a structure that is divided in working groups. We have working groups that cover the typical standard sectors: agriculture, forest, marine. We have working groups that they work on typical biomes, marine biomes or urban biomes. And we have also working groups that they work on specific areas like indicators, valuation, and the like. We also have national networks. So I don't know if probably in your country there is an ESP national network. You can inquire. Otherwise, you can just contact us directly and become member as individual or hopefully as an institution. You can move probably to the next one. So regarding the activities we're organizing here, I mentioned before about task forces. This is one on education. There is another one on valuation. But I want to emphasize here two activities that we are now trying to really foster, to strengthen. And there is an invitation also for you to join these endeavors. The first one is our delegations to the COP. We have been participating in the last COPs, and we are now preparing also for the next one. We want to have a presence there because we believe that it's still necessary to strengthen the ecosystem services science within the international arena in biodiversity conservation. And the second one is on IPBES. We are now in the process of preparing a delegation for the next IPBES plenary, which is going to be taking place in February in the UK, in Manchester. So again, if you are interested to join this, it's super simple. You just drop me an email, and then we can include you in our delegation, and hopefully we can make again a nice and important presence of ecosystem services partnership and ecosystem services science at the IPBES. You can probably go to the next one. So as I said before, I mean, we're a really vibrant community. No, we have a lot of young scholars that they are organizing themselves in the Young Ecosystem Services Specialists. It's called YES. And as I said, conferences are fantastic space for discussion and exchange. And I warmly invite you to join us next year in Prague. Next one. This is another invitation from my side. We are organizing at the ESP now a stronger presence as such in the assessment that are prepared from IPBES. The assessment in preparation now is this one on a spatial planning and connectivity assessment. We're going to be making a call to fill certain knowledge gaps that we have already identified within this assessment. And then you might have the possibility to help us to build a strong assessment as contributing author. It's going to be a fantastic team of 75 experts, many of them from the ESP, of course. Valia is going to be there with us, of course, working on this assessment. So my invitation is to join us and to make, a powerful evidence for the incorporation of biodiversity and ecosystem services in spatial planning in land and also in sea. Next one. So that's contact. My contact for ESP. So if you feel like move for what we are doing, just feel free to reach out anytime. That's all. Thank you very much. Wish you a great, fantastic webinar.
Fantastic, Luis. Thank you very much. Just to mention that all the session is recorded, so in case you want to reach back to Luis with any questions about what he mentioned, this is all going to be shared online, also through the BioTrails learning platform. So thanks so much for the intro and all the support. And I think we will let you go enjoy your live conference rather than the web one. So enjoy, Darwin. And now, without further delay, just to clarify that the link to the BioTrails learning platform, where all the content will be uploaded after the end of the webinar, will be shared with the participants through the chat of the meeting. And I will now give the floor to Veronica from the European Research Council to talk to us about the main findings of the report that they have developed. The floor is yours, Veronica. Please be reminded that any types of questions to Veronica should be typed in the meeting chat, and I will deliver them to her.
Okay, thank you, Valia, for the introduction. My name is Veronika Czako. I'm Scientific Officer at the European Research Council Executive Agency, and here I'm going to present you the report that we wrote about, actually a portfolio analysis result that we conducted on transformative change for a sustainable future. So not only biodiversity, but on a broader topic. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to say a few words about how the European Research Council is relating to Horizon Europe. So it's a part of Horizon Europe, but it's 70% of the entire Horizon Europe budget, but it has a different structure than the projects that you are participating in. Next, please. So basically, the European Research Council funds long-term grants to individual researchers from all over the world, and it's a bottom-up program. So we don't have the topics that in other Horizon Europe fields people apply to, but everybody can come with their own idea, and it's assessed by a panel of academics. So you have to choose your panel, and you can with any idea, and it will be assessed, and there is no prescribed topic description that you have to answer to. We have answer to. We have 3 main fields: life sciences, physical sciences and engineering, and social sciences and humanities. So these are the main domains. And also we have synergy grants that bring together the different domains. Next slide, please. This is relevant for where our report is coming from. So the European Research Council has a unique governance structure, because it has an independent scientific council with 22 members, including a president, and full authority over its strategy. So this is why we are not part of the prescribed topics in other Horizon programs. So there's a dedicated implementation structure that includes also the Commission and the ERC board. And because we have this scientific governing council, sometimes there are questions from the scientific council about certain topics. What are we finding? Because there's a large body of projects, and we need to extract the messages for certain connection to certain policy areas to channel the results in from this large body of research into policy making. Next slide, please. So the organization was founded in 2007, and since then, over 14,000 top researchers were funded since the creation, again, in 93 countries, and various very high-level prizes have been won. Just to give you an idea about the amount of research that we are addressing here. Next slide, please. So this is the report that we produced. It was published in December 2024, and it was also connected to the IBES Transformative Change report process. So we were in contact with the authors there, and so there was a connection made to make sure that we know about what is going on there. And the questions that were posed by 2 scientific council members, Harriet Bulkley and Einstein, one of the other vice presidents, is what is the ERC funding? What technological aspects are the main factor holding back the green transition? What are the barriers? So if technological aspects are not holding back, what are the barriers to overcome, and the factors that can accelerate the uptake of existing solutions? So what does the ERC fund to understand the concept of transformative change? So which are the projects that actually try to understand transformative change, what that means? Which are the projects that study the factors that drive and hinder the fundamental reorganization our society needs? What are the insights and recommendations for just green transitions, which are also in the focus of the Commission? And look at the connected challenges of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. So these were the main focus areas that we were trying to extract from this large body of portfolio that we have. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the portfolio analysis process that we were following. We have an in-house text mining tool. We search for the term transformative change, and we also highlighted some sectoral keywords that we combined this with, and we arrived at a body of 1,600 plus projects. Following this, we looked at our other mapping frontier research tool, which is also available to the public, and we identified more than 300 other projects. So we had our initial group of projects, and this was followed by the manual validation by scientific officers, myself, and other colleagues. We looked through all these projects. They were different. Some of them are already closed, some of them are beginning, some of them are in the middle of their life cycle. So we took a closer look at the proposals, the potential publications, the outcomes, and we clustered them. We looked at the themes that come out of these projects, and we tried to identify the main things that are relevant for transformative change. Again, we went to our text mining tool, and we automatically clustered what we came up with according to Sustainable Development Goal relevance. I will give you more on this. And we defined 5 thematic areas. So these were the main chapters of our report. So project examples were chosen on transformative potential results and potential for policy recommendations. And basically, when we identified these 5 clusters, we came back to the principal investigators, and we made interviews with the principal investigators with the projects that we found most relevant. And this is how we arrived at our final product. Next slide, please. So in this report, in the end, we arrived at 312 projects from 22 countries. Most of these projects were from social sciences and humanities, and most of them from our starting grant team. So we have different kinds of grants depending on the time passed between the PhD and the current role of the researcher. So depending on this, we have starting, consolidator, and advanced grants. We have proof of concept grants, and also, as I mentioned already, synergy grants, which connect researchers from different domains that come together as kind of like a consortium. So it's not an individual researcher-based one. So incidentally, most of the projects in this portfolio were from the starting grants. Next slide, please. So in terms of the scientific landscape of these projects, the main disciplines were environmental sciences, environmental social sciences, human geography was well represented, but also climatology and paleoclimatology, ecology. And in terms of the main topics, climate change, impact, adaptation, and mitigation was the most prevalent, but biodiversity conservation, biology, sustainability. And also the challenge for us was that each project was dealing with different things, and we had to extract the themes from all of that huge amount of information. Next slide, please. In terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, life on land and climate action were the most highly represented in the portfolio. And this slide shows the 5 thematic chapters that we identified in the end. So first of all, leverage points for sustainable transitions, the institutional governance, behavior, and finance aspects. We had 1 chapter on the just green transition. Here we included litigation, activism, equity, what we can learn from indigenous peoples and local communities about transformative change. The 3rd thematic chapter was on redefining prosperity, so the post-growth circular economy, new production models, but we also put raw materials here. The fourth topic was the healthy planet, where we looked at pollution, nature protection, natural resources and food systems, and finally sustainable urban development and infrastructures, where we also put water systems, transport, energy, buildings, and urban planning. But the main challenge was that some projects, of course, address different parts of these thematic clusters in different intensity. Next slide, please. What we have learned in a nutshell from this analysis, that our projects show that green transitions are underway and are possible. Our grantees emphasize the need to fully rethink our systems with justice as a prerequisite. Frontier research can deliver a better understanding of the multi-crises that we live in and their dynamics. So basically what comes out of the scientific community bottom up actually delivers relevant messages for policymaking as well without predefined topics. Our grants provide space to address complexity of environmental and climate challenges across disciplines, systems, and among multiple actors. Social sciences and humanities are key to understanding these challenges and identify pathways for transforming our societies. And ERC projects can inform the design and implementation of the policies of the EU Green Deal and the objectives towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Actually, many of the principal investigators who are running these projects are connected to policymaking circles directly, and they advise the Commission. Next slide, please. Here I'm going to talk about a few of the project stories that we have identified. This one is the thematic chapter on leverage points. This is the problem shifting project, which is from the principal investigator Rakyun E. Kim from Utrecht, the Netherlands. This project investigates the trade-offs that can occur between the equally important goals of over 1,000 international environmental treaties. And the principal investigator highlighted that we should be focusing on the synergies and how to scale them up instead of the conflicts between these environmental agreements. Next slide, please. The next project is Equal C, from which we have placed in the Just Green Transition thematic cluster, which is by Sebastián Villasanta, which you probably know, from Santiago de Compostela, Spain. He's based there, and the project is about transformative adaptation towards ocean equity. The project created a database of international activities to identify positive examples with transformative potential, and the PI highlighted that transformative change is complex and practical solutions have unintended consequences often. So all of this has to be coordinated. Next slide, please. Finally, my final slide is about this is from the thematic chapter, The Healthy Planet. This is the Future Nature project, again from Belgium, by Konrad van Meerbeek, which is about shaping functional ecosystems of the future. And the project studies functional assisted migration of species and proposes a new approach to nature conservation. And he highlights that climate change adaptation is not only necessary for agriculture and urban ecosystems that are human-dominated, but also natural ecosystems. So this was just to highlight to some of the projects that we highlighted in our report, and we could go on because it's a large portfolio, and more of it can be found in our report in more detail. So thank you very much. I think I have reached the end of this presentation. Here you can find more of our reports, more portfolio analysis from our organization on different topics. So I'm looking forward to your questions when they arrive.
This is great, Veronica. Thank you very much for this nice and extensive overview of the work that has been carried out and also funded by ERC. Are there any questions to Veronica? Please be reminded that you can type any questions on the chat. I don't see anything written. Maybe then I just have one very quick question. I have to admit I haven't had the chance to read the whole report. I mean, I skimmed through it. Maybe it would be great if we can provide also a link to the chat, to the report for people to be able to download. And
I think the QR code helps, but I will.
It's there, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, but of course that's not in the chat. So yeah, I will do it because then.
no problem.
Yeah.
Maybe a very, very quick question from me about all this overview that you have done, because you discussed a lot about the types of disciplines that have been involved, the synergies and the main thematics. Did you look, or did you try to identify potential solutions, or the most critical pathways that have been identified? Were there commonalities among those observed, or was this very context specific? Because this is also something that we try to achieve within our cluster, to see if there are shared, priorities, and it's quite a challenging exercise.
I think at the level of a more broad analysis is even more challenging. So we did not do this. We tried to kind of be in a step higher to see that we can say that transformative change is possible. So there is this common understanding, but we didn't look into, maybe there are projects that look at the pathways. I can look into the portfolio, because there were projects that were really looking at transformative change itself, because for other projects we had to really identify the connections to transformative change and the barriers and what we understand under transformative change. So yeah, I think some of the projects that actually do look at transformative change in the first thematic chapter may have looked at these pathways, and those would be the most relevant for you.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much, Veronica.
Thank you.
So any other questions that might come up, please feel free to use the Q&A part of our webinar. And then I will give the floor now to Christy Walker from EDH Zurich, who is representing the BioTrails project, to give us evidence from the work that they have delivered. Christy, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Hi, as was just mentioned, my name is Christy. I'm a researcher at ETH supporting the BioTrails project. And I wanted to talk about one of the BioTrails case studies, which was Greek aquaculture. And we performed a life cycle impact assessment on the aquaculture systems in Greece and looked at the climate and biodiversity impacts induced from these systems, and then looked at various scenarios that could possibly be implemented to reduce these impacts. Okay, next slide. So I don't know what the background of the audience is here, but I'm going to give a very brief overview of what actually life cycle impact assessment is. So essentially, we are looking at inputs into the system. As an example, we'll look at the production of 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. And what life cycle impact assessment does is wants to measure the environmental damage or the environmental impacts of producing this certain amount of electricity or fuel or wheat or whatever product we want to examine. And so there are many different impact assessment methods, not a lot, but there are different impact assessments methods to look at the inputs of these systems, see how many greenhouse gases would be produced, or what kind of damage there would be to the ecosystems or damage to human health from producing a certain product. And we are looking at these assessment methods and then measuring the impacts from it. So our study focused on 2 impact assessment methods. We wanted to measure climate change of the Greek aquaculture system, and we used IPC 2021 for that. And then we also wanted to look at the ecosystem quality of like what kind of ecosystem damage was induced from the production of Greek aquaculture. Okay, next slide. So looking at the aquaculture system, I'm just going to go through some of the inputs that were measured and needed to produce essentially 1 kilogram of fish at the end for consumer consumption. So obviously the aquaculture systems, the fish in these systems require food. This is both land-based food, so they were consuming things like soy and maize and wheat, as well as fish-based food and other animal-based foods. So and this is through fish meal and fish oil from wild fisheries. They required the use of chemicals. These aquaculture systems are healthier when they're vaccinated, and also require the use of some antibiotics and other chemicals to keep the systems operating. They require packaging, both for products that are being consumed by the aquaculture system, but also for the final product to be distributed to the end consumers. Which brings me to the next point. They also need to be transported. So the the final processing of the fish, that they're distributed essentially internationally, and this also induces environmental impacts. They require fuel and electricity to operate the systems that are running the aquaculture system. So this is in the terms of diesel or natural gas and Greek electricity mix. Requires biosphere inputs such as water. So fresh water is used to clean the systems, as well as seawater, which is where the aquaculture facilities are located, and waste is generated. So this also has environmental impacts because there's fish residue waste, there's excess nutrients from the fish living in the environment, there's packaging waste that all generates impacts as well. Okay, next slide. So we broke down the entire system into 5 different life cycle stages, so they could be evaluated independently and kind of look where the hotspot would be for the whole cycle. So these were broken down into feed, the hatchery operation, the growing operation, processing and packaging operation, and then distribution. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the feed is coming from land-based material in aquaculture systems, and this is different than wild fisheries because they're the fish are on their own for finding their food in the natural environment, essentially. But the aquaculture systems also do require the inputs of wild fishery-based food as well, typically from anchovies. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned, we looked first at climate change impacts. So looking at all of the inputs that we had for each of the life cycle stages, we used IPC 2021 global warming potential of 100 years to measure the kilogram CO2 equivalents per kilogram of fish that were produced. Okay, next slide. And these were the final results from the climate change impact. And I think there's 2 main takeaways from this. First, 4 kinds of fish were analyzed, the common sea bream, mager, gilthead sea bream, and sea bass. And we can see there's significant differences in impacts depending on the fish being produced. Common sea bream requires much more feed to produce the same amount of fish than the other fish. So we're automatically seeing higher impacts just because of the amount of feed required to produce the same amount of fish. The other takeaway from this is that we see the feed is actually the main contributor to the impacts here. So looking at all the other life cycle stages like the hatchery, processing, growth, distribution, the major climate change impacts are coming from the feed production, with the other ones contributing also significantly, but not nearly as much. Okay, next slide. And so next we wanted to look at essentially the biodiversity loss or the impacts on ecosystem quality due to the production of these fish. And we used the Recipe 2016 methodology to do this, which looks at different inputs and kind of categorizes them into different environmental impacts. So one of these impacts is ecosystem quality. And this is giving us an indicator in the units of species year per kilogram of fish. And I just want to talk a little bit about what this means. Species year essentially means it's the number of species lost per year globally due to the activity taking place. And I'll explain how this is calculated a little bit on the next slide. So for climate change, we're only looking at the greenhouse gases that are generated from the activity we're looking at. When we're looking at Recipe, however, they're taking into account, for example, global warming. So how many species are lost, freshwater species, terrestrial species, marine species are lost due to the impacts and the extreme weather events and changes in temperature from global warming that's induced by human activities. Another one, especially relevant to aquaculture, is ecotoxicity. So there's chemicals used in aquaculture production. There's chemicals used for crop production, and these all have impacts on the environment in terms of species damage, because I mean, some are intended not only to damage species such as pesticides or insecticides, but these all have effects on the amount of species and the ecosystem quality. Another example that's particularly applicable to aquaculture systems is eutrophication. So the addition of the nutrients coming from the fish, the runoff from fertilizer, all of these things are affecting the ecosystem and limiting species availability and ability to live in these conditions, which is all contributing towards damaging the environment and their ability to survive. The one other big one I wanted to point out is we're looking at land use transformation. So land use is one of the major drivers of biodiversity loss, and the expansion of agriculture into forested areas or other types of areas that have high biodiversity in them is a major driver of species, the loss of species and biodiversity loss. So rather than just climate change, the recipe methodology looks at all of these factors together to determine what kind of damage there would be to the environment and essentially on biodiversity. Okay, next slide. So looking at the biodiversity impact results, they're super similar to the climate change results. We see the same ratio between the different kinds of fish, but we also see that feed is a much larger contributor. And again, this is because of the land required to grow the feed for aquaculture fish, which is driving the increased impacts in biodiversity loss here, much less than the impacts from operating pumps and boats and fuel being burned and things like that. Okay, next slide. So with this initial analysis, we were able to say, okay, as things are, we see that these are our ecosystem, these are our biodiversity loss, these are our climate change impacts for the different kinds of fish with the operation that exists. What are ways to potentially reduce these impacts? So I'm going to look at two of the different life cycle stages in detail. Okay, next slide. So looking at the feed scenarios, we see the baseline, which is how it was currently modeled and what they're currently consuming as 0. So there's no change here. But let's say we replace the conventional maize with organic maize. We replace the conventional rapeseed with organic rapeseed. We replace the conventional soybean that was modeled with organic soybean. We see we are able to reduce our climate change impacts by a certain percentage by switching to organic material. And this is because there's lower impacts in, there's no pesticides used, so there's lower impacts from that. There's no, there's only organic fertilizer used, which has lower climate change impacts. But we also see there is potential increases in biodiversity impacts. And this is because the organic yields could be slightly lower than what they would be for conventional. Thus, we require more land, and thus we're driving biodiversity loss by increasing the amount of land needed to produce the similar amount of grain or crop. Okay, next slide. So we did a similar evaluation for the processing scenarios. The baseline is at 0, and we ran the hypothetical of, let's say we can reduce the packaging use for the final product by 20%. We replace the electricity used at the processing facility with renewable electricity, and we reduce the nutrient emissions in the wastewater leaving the facility. We can see we have net benefits in both climate change and biodiversity impacts. So all of these are moving in the same direction. Then there's no, they're all correlated in a positive direction. Okay, next slide. So looking at each of the life cycle stages we looked at, we see there are potential reductions of up to 55% for climate change and also reductions in biodiversity loss. So implementing things like on-site solar, switching to organic materials, reducing water, reducing waste, reducing packaging, all of these will result in positive environmental, reduced environmental impacts for both biodiversity and climate change, except for feed. And this is again because of the potential increased impacts in biodiversity loss by moving to organic feed. So this is looking at them as individual life cycle stages, but on the next slide, you see when we're looking overall, we have a potential reduction. So let's say we change everything we can, well, some things that we can to make it more environmentally friendly. Let's say we could potentially reduce our our climate change impacts by 14%, but this would also yield an increase in biodiversity loss impacts by 0.3%. And this is because feed is such a dominating life cycle stage in the impact assessment. So even though we're achieving much higher reductions in other life cycle stages, feed is still the one that really needs to be addressed to show real reductions. Okay, the next slide. So some of the takeaways are we need to optimize feed. Lowering the climate change impacts is not, or lowering the impacts of the feed going in the climate change impacts isn't necessarily correlated with a decrease in biodiversity impacts. So this needs to be optimized to see what kind of maximum benefits we can get in both directions here for biodiversity loss and for climate change. But there are some easy wins with the obvious changes of moving to renewable electricity, replacing diesel in the boats with biofuels instead, and reducing some of the inputs, such as the packaging inputs that are used in the processing operation now. And I think another easy one is changing consumer preferences. So there's no reason why people need to be consuming the highest impact fish rather than the other one. They offer similar protein content, similar nutrients, similar calorie. So really, it's just a matter of taste or what we're providing to people to eat. And I do think I need to mention the caveat here of aquaculture in general could have other biodiversity impacts that are not addressed in life cycle impact assessment. And this includes the effects of the use of antibiotics and vaccines on the fish, or what happens if there is an escape of fish into wild fisheries, how that affects biodiversity loss in biodiversity in wild fisheries. The effects on the seabed from all the nutrients deposition from the fish, and how this interacts with other species that might be coming in to move in once the aquaculture system is changing. So these are not accounted, and it's possible that once metrics to measure these are available in LCA, that the biodiversity loss results could change considerably, I think, for aquaculture. So, but these are currently in the process of being investigated and developed. So, all right. Are there any questions?
Thanks a lot, Christy, and also for being perfectly on time.
Wow, that's luck.
Yeah, exactly. Any questions from our participants? I don't see anything on the chat or the Q&A. Okay, then I will ask a question
Sure.
again. No, I mean, okay, I'm familiar with the work because we work on the same project. So. But I do have one question, because I was not sure about that. Because I mean, it became very apparent in your results that the aquaculture feed was the most impactful.
Yeah.
And of course, the suggestions for alternative pathways also are mostly on this direction. So my question is, was this considered also, I mean, in terms of data that was taken into account to calculate that, did you also take into account the fact that this is in most cases imported from long distance countries from different continents, or is this a separate part of the methodology, and how easy is to get access to this?
So I use the EcoInvent database as the source for the inventories, essentially, and then to calculate the impacts. And so this is only as integrated as it is in EcoInvent. So there are different source countries. So this was modeled using soybean from Brazil, conventional soybean from Brazil, and then I believe organic soybean. I'm not sure of the source of country. It might be the global average for that. But in that, it would have like a generic transport factor, right? I didn't calculate the impact specifically of getting the soybean from Brazil to Greece, because that's kind of built into that. It could be taken out and modeled separately, but I think in the end, that's not going to be a huge contributor to the biodiversity loss, but also likely not also the climate change impacts.
Yeah, because I also think that what we've seen in the literature is, and the evidence is that these distant flows and interactions, they're very, very impactful and important. Okay. Any other questions for Christy or comments? Yes, so Mara has a question where these results compare to different protein resources like plant-based alternatives.
Oh, like comparing the fish to like a plant-based
The fish feed,
product.
I guess.
Oh, to fish feed. That was, we didn't compare. So this is really looking at the scenario changes from land-based products now, because there's not a lot of ways to change the fish-based products, like the modeling for the fish-based products. So that's not shown here, and that wasn't investigated in detail. Do you mean like comparison between the land-based and the fish-based food for the feed?
Well, not necessarily for the feed. I just wonder, if you look at these key takeaways, what are the things to be changed to make it more sustainable? I feel like those are changes kind of in the margins. And if you would change the whole industry or the whole chain or switch to a different product, I think that's kind of the more transformative
eliminating
way to go.
Aquaculture completely, essentially, or
or seawater opportunities from other
I mean, I think there are opportunities, obviously. I did not go into the details of how. I mean, I think that's a whole other topic that could be addressed, essentially. I mean, then we're talking about changing consumer preferences first, with how willing are people to change to a different protein source or eliminate fish from their diet, especially in such like fish heavy diet, I think, as the Mediterranean is. And I think the first step would just be promoting the consumption of the lower impact fish. I mean, that already eliminates a lot of emissions and environmental impacts just from changing preferences of which fish should be promoted and consumed, essentially. So, but yeah, your transformative change does go farther than just renewable energy and looking at modeling feed, for sure. I think that's definitely the next step.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you both so much. Just to mention very briefly that I know I cannot search my database, but there is one of our sister projects that is also working on that case study. So that may be another pathway for joint work. Okay, then given there are no other questions on the chat, I will give the floor directly to Mara De Pater from the BIONEXT project to give us their perspective of an evidence-based approach that they have developed. The floor is yours, Mara.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe first a quick disclaimer. Evidence-based is maybe a big word for what I'll be presenting because it's still in development. But we ran one case, so I can say something about that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a fun intervention that we've developed within BIONEXT, with the goal to center a more relational and nature perspective within the debate on transformative change. So in the next slide, our starting point to develop this intervention was that we observed that in the concept transformative change and in the literature, it's mostly very anthropocentric. So it kind of assumes that societal changes driven by humans are the way to go within transformative change. And within that, nature is often seen as a more passive subject, which is vulnerable, that needs protection, rather than an active agent or something that has a force of its own. And nature is often framed as something separate from people. So humans and nature are separated. They influence each other for sure, but they're not one and the same. And I think our approach is that transformative change happens in social ecological systems, so not just human societies or human systems, but in this interaction between the social and ecological. And we see that nature could be an active agent in driving transformative changes. Changes in nature, changes in ecosystems and biodiversity very much shape how societies and humans act in that space, but also globally. And transformative change is a relational process in which nature and society are one or they're interdependent. So that was kind of the starting point for us. So these observations and kind of ways that we see transformative change made us think, like, how can we help people to center nature more, to get this relational perspective when they're talking about transformative change. And so next slide. Yeah, our question is, how can we shift this perspective among people that are working on transformative change, whether it's practitioners or scientists? How can we kind of shift that perspective? So next slide. Here you see a picture of the fun intervention, which I will explain shortly, and how we carry that out. The idea roughly is that we've designed a story-based game with different characters set in a particular landscape, and will help people view that landscape and the developments in that landscape through the eyes of another. And another can be human, but it can also be an animal, a plant, or a landscape object, such as a dike. So maybe in the next slide, I'll quickly show some characters. These are some of the characters that we used. So in the game that the picture was taken from, the scenario was a peatland area in the Netherlands where there was both agriculture and a nature reserve. And the agriculture in there was mostly dairy farming, but in a pretty unsustainable way. So a lot of water had to be drained from the area to uphold the dairy production, but this was causing a lot of damage to nature and a lot of oxidizing of the soil. So not something that can be sustained forever. And then we kind of sketched a bit of a history of this area, and people could pick their character and see how they would experience the landscape, how they would experience relations with each other. In the next slide, there's an example of one of these character cards. So everyone got quite some information, again, story-based information about their character. It's all very speculative. Obviously, we don't know how a beaver thinks exactly, but this more speculative story can help people to imagine being that beaver and imagine thinking in a slightly different way about their relations to other species or other landscape objects and their surroundings, and especially how these surroundings change in cases of transformative change. I'm quickly going to walk you through the setup. So I think it's nice if you kind of know how the game works. Maybe it inspires you to run similar workshops. So maybe just slowly click through exactly. We start with a little pre-reflection. So before the whole story and the setup of the characters, we ask people to reflect on their worldviews, values, and views on transformative change with a couple of questions that kind of help them guide through it. Something that I can share later as well. Then we share the characters. People can pick a character that they feel drawn to. And one of the facilitators does a bit of storytelling. So they're sketching the context, telling the story of a certain landscape. In our case, this was a peatland area, but we're also developing a story for a different area. Then there's some interaction between the characters with guided questions. So they're asked to reflect how they relate to time, like how long do they look back and how long do they look forward. They place themselves relative to each other, so they get a bit of a feel of how do the characters experience this time element, and a similar set of questions about space, how they relate to each other. So there's a bunch of guided questions. Then once they're really into the character and into the story, the situation in this landscape develops, which is where the transformative change element comes in. And again, the characters have interaction with each other, guided by some questions that helps them relate to transformative change a bit more. Then there's a small element of storytelling again to conclude the story. And then there's post-reflection. And this is like the reflection obviously helps the participants of the workshop to get more of a sense about how their worldviews and values might shift through this workshop. But it is also a research moment for us to understand, what is this workshop doing? How can we improve it? Is this a valuable way to go? So in this post-reflection, we're asking people to kind of look back at the answers that they gave for the first questions, reflect on that first individually, and then also in interaction with the other participants. And that's roughly the setup. Maybe I'll pause here for one moment and see if there's any questions about the setup of the workshop, because I know I've been running through it quite quickly.
I do have a question about the setup, but just a very quick one, because you mentioned in the previous slide that you asked them to reflect on their worldviews and define their values and the views on transformative change. To what extent was this guided? Did you use a pre-selected ontology on that, or was it completely open-ended?
Yeah, so this is a part that we're still developing a bit. So in the first workshop where we tested it, we didn't have a lot of time to do this reflection. But next week we'll do it again, and then we've fully developed this reflection bit. And we've used the the Nature Futures framework to distill these 3 main values. And based on a quick literature review, we've looked at different ontologies or worldviews, mostly related to human-nature relations. And then we developed a few kind of statements about how people and nature relate to each other. And then they can indicate in how much they agree or which statements fits their worldview best. So yeah, we've tried to make it a bit accessible, but based on some existing frameworks or literature. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And there is one more question from Ioana. She's asking if the participants of the workshop were consumers and which was your target group?
Yeah, so far we're mostly kind of targeting people that work on transformative change one way or the other. So in the first workshop, we ran it with a group of people following a course that's called Future for Biodiversity. And these are people working in different sectors, but they're all working somehow with biodiversity and change. And I think it's a bit of a mix of people working at corporate businesses and also governments, but I'm not exactly sure. This is something I can look into. The next ones were mostly targeting people that either work, or we try to bring a mix of people into the workshop, and they can work in an academic setting or nature conservation or policy making. So a little bit of a mix, but people that like not the general public, so to say. Yeah, thanks.
Great.
Okay, then
I think you
think I'll-
can move on.
Yeah, I'll quickly move on with some insights. So we've only done the full thing once, so this is very preliminary. But what we saw is that it can be a little bit awkward at first for people to pretend they're a bird or a plant. But most people really ease into it through the guided questions, so that helps them to reflect and to see others in the group be motivated and funny and creative and speculative, so they kind of help each other get into it. We saw that it really helps people to get into this more ecosystem thinking, so how different species relate to each other. But it was a bit harder to get into the human nature relations. So we're adapting the story a little bit and the characters a little bit to help them get more into that type of thinking. The active role of nature in transformative change does get acknowledged, but it's a bit hard to say whether they carry that acknowledgement through after the workshop as well. And we saw that it's a fun and bonding experience. So after the workshop, a lot of people were kind of joking about their characters and well, it came back a couple of times, but the risk is obviously that it's just a fun workshop and not really a learning experience. So that's something that we have to look out for as well. Yeah, so I just wanted to share what are our next steps. So in the next slide, next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So we're running the workshop a couple of times again. So next week, we're doing it in our office with some colleagues and students from our master program. Then in August and September, I'll be on a research visit in South Africa, running the workshop a couple of times with some people there. And we're also involving someone who's an environmental psychologist to get a little bit more of that expertise into the workshop and the analysis of the workshop. And then afterwards, probably a couple times in and around the Netherlands again. And the idea is that we then have two kind of solid versions, one for peatland areas, which is an important topic in the Netherlands, and one for Kruger National Park, or actually the boundaries of Kruger National Park, where there's some tensions for South Africa. And what happens after is the question, but it would be nice to develop it further and see if we can develop some sort of accessible guide for other people to develop their own story, develop their own characters, and run a similar workshop. And we want to write it up into a paper. So I think in the next slide, I have some questions to you. As we want to write it up into a paper, it will be helpful to make a bit of a comparison with other workshops. So if you have any examples, it doesn't have to be workshop described in academic literature. It can also be in gray literature. Any ideas, please share them. And if you can think of any interesting groups to play with, please let me know. And I think I'll end it here because I'm also short on time. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mara. I think you're perfectly on time. I'm just gonna go through the chat because there are several things that are written. So firstly, just to clarify that Annie was also complimenting that the exercise was a mix of professionals working on sustainability, biodiversity across diverse public institutes and private organizations like banks, insurance companies, energy companies, dairy industry, service industry, ministries, etc. So it's a very broad range of stakeholders. Then I think following your question on examples, Jason also shared a link to an article on how to gamify stakeholder engagement. So maybe that would be a useful source of input. And then Veronica was saying that it would be interesting to apply this to energy communities. I see you have energy companies there, so, but I guess that's not what you mean by energy communities, correct? Okay. And I'm not sure if there are other comments or questions on the method or suggestions. I can remember for sure that there have been other projects that did similar kinds of workshops from our sister project cluster, but I think we can dig up a little our exchange and then look it up.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have a question about, so basically these are workshops that you run, but do you go back to these groups and do it again, or is there any kind of time dimension, or is it like a one-off? So are you planning to observe groups over time, how they change, if their thinking changes, or this is just a pilot for now?
Yeah, it's mostly just a pilot for now. I think with some of the groups, it's easy to reach them and maybe see if it had any effect over time. But this is not something that we would include, I think, in the article. And maybe something that's good to note is that some are really a one-off thing. We organize it, we invite people, they may know each other, but they're not necessarily a group that's working together. In this education program, Future for Biodiversity, these are people that did do a longer education program with each other, but they work at different organizations. And we're also doing it with some sort of innovation network with people that are in different organizations, but they all work on peatland transformations or peatland innovations. So they're more into the topic, and there we have a longer collaboration. So it's easy to kind of see back after a couple of months if there was any effect. But I think for those workshops where it's just a one-time event, it's a bit harder. But it's something to consider. So I'll think about that. Thanks.
Fantastic. Let me see. I don't see any other comments or questions. So thank you very much, Mara, for this interesting part of the work. And I will then move to our last speaker for today's webinar, but not least, Vasilia Pentsiou, who will show us another type of game, I would say, the serious game for sustainable production and consumption. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valia. Hello, everyone. I'm Vasilia Pentsiou, and I'm an associate project manager in climate resilience at Traxys Environmental. And today I'm going to present the BIOTRAILS series game for sustainable production and consumption and how it integrates citizen science to drive meaningful transformative change. Next slide, thank you. So the series game is a digital game designed to raise awareness on the biodiversity impacts of production and consumption by engaging players in stimulating and fun experiences. At the same time, it aims to encourage effective behavioral change towards involvement in participatory processes to accelerate transformative change. The game unfolds across various scenarios that highlight the impact of consumption choices on biodiversity, and through these experiences, the players gain a deeper understanding of the complex connections between everyday actions and biodiversity-associated impacts. Through the game, players face engaging challenges and quizzes that help uncover the real-world impacts of their choices on biodiversity. The game is now available in 4 languages: English, Greek, Spanish, and Portuguese. So in the next slide, we can see what makes this game unique, which is the integration of citizen science that involves the public in scientific research. By comparing players' responses before and after the gameplay, we can analyze how awareness and attitudes shift over time. This data contributes to citizen science by helping to understand the effectiveness of educational tools in changing behavior, providing insights into consumer attitudes, and supporting broader research into social influences on consumption. Through this process, the series game turns players into active participants in citizen science, using their personal evolution to contribute data that could shape future sustainability strategies. Now let's explore the game in the next slide. So on the home screen, players can view the percentage. I think if you click, a box will appear. Thank you. Players can view the percentage of participants who answered the pre and post questions, demonstrating how behavior changes after playing the game. Players are encouraged to sign up so they can save progress, track performance, and return to continue playing at any time. However, it is an optional step. Next slide, please. So the first stage introduces players to the principles of citizen science. The first key question asks players to rank the 5 most important criteria when choosing a product, which could be the price, taste, quality, origin, brand, health, social ethics, and environmental sustainability. Then, next slide, please. This is followed by questions assessing how sustainable their behavior is in different aspects of daily life. Moving on, in the second stage, players enter the main gameplay. They complete missions and solve challenges that reflect real-life sustainability dilemmas. And there are different levels. For example, in level 1, building awareness. This is introductory. This is an introductory level which lays the groundwork by familiarizing the player with the challenges faced by biodiversity and how consumption choices contribute to these issues. Level 2, deepening understanding. Here, the player delves deeper into the complexities of the BIOTRAILS value chains, exploring the cause and effect relationships between consumer actions and environmental consequences. Level 3, strategic decision making. As the knowledge expands, the player encounters more challenging scenarios that require strategic decisions considering the long-term applications of their consumption choices. And in level 4, advocacy and change, which is the final level, it empowers the player to become an advocate for change by exploring strategies for influencing policy and promoting sustainable practices. Next slide, please. So this is the main page. All value chains are displayed, and the player can start with any value chain they prefer simply by clicking on its icon. When selecting a value chain, a quiz appears with several options. And in the next slide, we can see that if the player chooses the sustainable option, they earn 3 points, along with a short text explaining why the choice is considered sustainable. On the other hand, if the player selects a non-sustainable option, they receive 0 points, accompanied by text that explains why the choice is not sustainable. A player can replay any value chain to increase their points and see if they have learned the second time. The third and final stage in the next slide encourages players to repeat their initial questions and see whether their behavior has changed after playing the game, which fits citizen science. Also, in the next slide, you can see the same questions. And then, next slide, please. Once a level is completed, players can see their rank on a global sustainability leaderboard, which encourages competition and learning. The more sustainable the answers to the quizzes, the more points the player earns, and the higher they climb on the leaderboard. Next slide, please. So for us, gaining feedback is very important as it helps us improve the game and make it more enjoyable for everyone. And by clicking on the 3 dots in the top right corner of the game screen, players can rate their experience and share their thoughts or suggestions. And this was it. Thank you so much for your attention. We encourage you to scan the QR code play the serious game. And I will also leave the link to the game in the chat, so you can give it a try if you like.
Great. Thank you very much, Vasilia, for this overview. Are there any questions or comments to the serious game application that was just delivered? No. I see a hand. No. I see a hand from Alba, but I don't think you can speak, so I think you have to type. Am I correct?
Yes,
Yes, you have to type
comments.
your question. Yeah. Not activated, so I can wait for you to type. In the meantime, I can ask a very quick question to Vasilia. To what degree was it easy to engage with users, and what was your experience with that?
So we have collected their answers. We are processing the data, and we have seen that players do change their behavior after their gameplay. At least they learn something about sustainability, and they improve their knowledge about sustainability in production and consumption.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Alba, for taking the time to type your questions. So Alba is asking, were there challenges to play the game if the users have no internet connection or an unstable internet connection? And if there is or will be developed like an offline option for that?
Well, so far there's not an offline version, but this is a very nice idea. We could do that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks so much. Alba is also thanking you for your answer. So if there are no further comments, I have one very last question, because at some point you were explaining that the users were asked to, were given a ranking on how sustainable their selection was. And my question is, how was this identified from you during the design of this? How did you choose which options are sustainable or not? And how straightforward was this for the users and for the design of the tool?
So for the users, they are not supposed to know what are the sustainable options. They have to go with their instincts and just answer as they think. And for us, we evaluate environmental sustainability as the most sustainable answer. And every answer, depending on the rating. So if you choose an answer first or second or third, this gets a rating. So we compare the initial answers and the final answers, and then we see if the rating has increased, decreased, or remained the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. And I think with this, we are reaching the end of today's webinar. So I would like to thank all the 4 speakers for taking the time and for sharing their insights and the part of the work. So today it was a very diverse webinar, because we really could see how different types of methodologies and different types of of application context were developed. We started from, a broad overview, a mechanistic approach that was then presented by Christy, and then we went to a real more tool-oriented approach that has to do with stakeholder engagement. So we saw all types of methodological aspects that have been developed, and I would like to thank everyone for sharing their insights. I think most of this is still evolving as we see, so it would be great to see also the final products and the way they will be developed. What I want to remind everybody is that this session was recorded, so the recording of the webinar will be stored online on the LAA platform of BioTrails project, which was the link for which is shared in the chat by our colleague Danai, and that the final one, because it was a series of 4 webinars on different parts, is coming after the summer break, so 23rd of September, and the topic is the actual tools for transformative change. Again, how they have been developed by the different projects and experienced, and what are the, let's say, do's and don'ts out of those. So we really hope we will see you there again. Soon we will share a registration link for the final round of webinars, and this will also be shared through our gold supporter, as I would say, the Ecosystem Services Partnership. And I think that's it from our side. So I would like to thank everyone for their participation, and I'm not sure if Danai or Joanna want to add something before we close the webinar.
Oh, we're covered, Valia. Thank you very much.
Great. So thanks to everybody, and have a great summer break as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Well
you.
deserved.
See you in the next
Thank you.
webinar.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.